Minister of Infrastructure, President of the Congress, dear CEOs of our telecommunication operators, colleagues, thank you very much for participating in this Congress. Just a few final words. And I want to make a disclaimer. These initial words were not written by ChatGPT, Bard, or any language model, because this experimentation finished at the beginning of the Congress. What I wanted to say, these are my remarks that I collected throughout the Congress, and I'm going to have to be brief to comply with time. First of all, I'd like to thank the Congress's president. We always want to have a first line president to help us set it up. What's the best content to solve problems problems linked to these initiatives, and it was with pleasure that we interacted with you. Thank you, Pedro Cisa Vieira, for the support provided. Then I'd like to thank the APDC team, big APDC team. Since it's a small team, it's always able to set several activities throughout the year, and the logistics which was required to set it up was quite a huge one. And we saw that when we saw people's faces, that they made sure that this Congress would be productive. So a show of hands to the APDC team that helped organize this Congress. Also, I'd like to thank RTP, because we don't know how to do a TV program. We don't know how to do it. And this Congress transformed in a TV program can only be done with someone with a channel that knows how to do it. The case of RTP that we've worked with so closely, no longer able to distinguish the differences and I can see Sandra from APDC being an anchor woman. Also, I'd like to thank our sponsors for their support, speakers, participants, members of the government that were present, and also like to thank the Minister of the Infrastructure. Our topic was the huge disruption happening in our market. The Congress started because there were two speakers, on one hand, Carlos Moedas and Mario Campolario, that gave as disruption examples the creation of the European Union, disruption at a global level of the global geopolitics. And it's curious because they spoke at different hours. They mentioned that example as being an important disruption, not technological, but at a global level. So the APDC Congress shows that there are contact points between different political forces. The president of the Congress emphasized that globalization did not favor Portugal, and now since there's a certain stepping back, there are opportunities. And why? Because we have more skilled people than we had decades before, because we have a telecommunication infrastructure which is much better than in most countries, and not what existed decades ago. And because Portuguese companies also have changed their technological characteristic. We have companies which are much more technological, much more sophisticated than what existed decades ago, than what existed. So indeed, there lies an opportunity for Portugal that it can take advantage of. We spoke about different disruptions. To start with tokenization, replacing assets, either digital or physical, by tokens. so as to be able to negotiate it, trade it in a more efficient way. Professor Amaral showed by the fact of trading these assets in a more efficient way and the ecosystem working in a quicker way, value is created in the economy. And this is happening. He asked in the end, could we have laws that could be self executed? This topic will be left to the legislature. We also heard the conclusions of this Congress. Conclusions drawn, the impact on how to work and to lead. And speakers drew our attention to the fact, namely David Rimmer, on how work is also changing location. People no longer work in the same place. It's changing time, and also it's changing in terms of contracts. There are people working for more locations and so on. So these changes are something that companies are leading with every day. They're handling all these aspects every day, and it's also a point to, it's also a takeaway. Carlos Moedas spoke about another disruption happening in the city. And this disruption happens, according to what he said, for three reasons. First of all, because cities have quite a lot of diversity. Second of all, the time is different, pace is different from one city to another, and they have different souls that he called the Lisboeta soul. It's obvious that cities are a development pole, which is important. We spoke about other aspects. We understand how the European regulator is considering digital currency, how commercial banks reacted to digital currency that the regulator is seeking to put in the market, and a conclusion was drawn. When we travel abroad, we only have MasterCard, Visa, American payment system, so as to be able to pay cross-border wise. And one of the reasons why the European Central Bank wants to establish the digital euro, it's to link it to a payment system which is truly European and autonomous of what exists in other regions. We spoke about different regulations, but the commercial bank represented here said it was always able to adapt to the changes in the market regulation, and it's not, and that it will be doing so as well. We mentioned the state's streamlining, not only mentioned by the Secretary of State Kamlania, but by what was said, going as far as possible, as far as it can be executed, that is, the state's simplification to remove costs from the Portuguese, and this promise was also made. Upskills was also addressed, what APDC is doing with its members by the requalification, upskilling of so many people in the country. Also, we heard being mentioned, and this was a topic that we analyzed in the State of the Nation of the Media, how they're evolving, developing with their hardships, transferring advisement to digital, audience fragmentation, transforming digital, that they themselves have to carry out with the investment need, price increase of their providers, suppliers, that they have to bear, difficulty to measure audiences with different groups and on different platforms. And they drew the attention that given the quality of the telecommunication network in Portugal, only 5% of the Portuguese CTDT. And isn't there a cheaper way to cover these 5%? This was one of the questions. And also we heard the Minister of the Economy speak about the opportunity that Portugal can take advantage if it uses the technology which is emerging in the Portuguese companies, either in the largest or SMEs. We heard what happened in the digital RRP. Also, we heard what this plan is like in Spain, and also an outline was mentioned about what is foreseen for the RRP in Portugal. We heard the National Monitoring Committee represented by Pedro Domingues asking for more streamlining, rapidity in analyzing applications. And also, we heard an analysis on the economy through Ricardo Reis' participation and the Congress president. It, it, there was an optimistic tone that is was mentioned about the opportunity that exists, mentioned by the Congress president in Portugal, but what we need to focus on so that we can really seize that opportunity. Also, we went through, we heard about technologies which are more recent in terms of application, promising quite a lot, such as computing. How is quantum communication carried out? We heard about the projects that are being done in Portugal, but a very important remark, Portugal is not lagging behind in that development. Portugal is at the forefront, a pioneer developing these systems, from projects that we lead to development a new national cipher machine. We spoke also about the risks, cybersecurity risks, and so on. We spoke about AI. And strangely enough, how these two players that are advancing with these language models have a similar speech, a similar discourse, with a language model with platforms, with a basic platform, and productivity application at the top. Each spoke of theirs, but it was very clear what will appear soon. The productivity tools of these players increased with AI capacity. We spoke about autonomous driving, difficulties inherited, and also we spoke about the telecommunication infrastructure business. This debate was started last year and also included this year fast fiber, and we saw how this business has not only been instrumental for the country's coverage, but also for the telecommunication operators, which was just referred to, so as to release the means to invest in their own business, And finally, the debate that you've just heard, I'm not going to summarize it, just to mention the new CEO entrance always happens a month before the APDC Congress. It happens a month before. It happened with Luis, with Anna, with Miguel, I don't remember, but it should have happened a month ago. With this new CEO entrance, it shows how important the APDC Congress is up to the operators designating their managers. Dear friends, let me also say the following. In all sessions that we heard, practically, this is my testimony, mentioned the quality of our telecommunication network coverage as being one of the biggest strategic advantages of Portugal. No one said otherwise, said that there was a problem of competition, of a lack of infrastructure, so that we had too many white areas. This is a testimonial of those that are on the ground using these applications. We distinguished territories, cities of the future, and it's the end of the Congress. It was a pleasure to have you with us. Hopefully, we can continue on improving this model. And now I will ask the minister to close this session on behalf of the government. Welcome, Mr. João Galamba. You have the floor.
Senhor Presidente da Associação Portuguesa para o Desenvolvimento das Comunicações.
President of APDC, Mr. Carapuça, President of the Congress, Dr. Pedro Cisa Vieira, representatives of the sector and the industry, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to start with an anticlimax by saying that I'm not going to talk about the regulator. This was highly discussed by those present. I will speak about what I had in mind. A sector made up of media, telecom, and ICTs companies is a structuring sector for the country and the pillar of our economy. This sector generated in 2021 a business volume of 17.6 million euros, and around 40% were generated by electronic communication companies. The contribution of the gross added value of these companies for the Portuguese GDP is also relevant, around 1.7% in 2021, with an average annual investment by these companies of around 1 billion. In 2021, this investment reached 1.6 million euros, given the acquisition of spectrum within the scope of the 5G auction. We cannot imagine a world without electronic communication, either the way we work, socialize with family and friends, how we produce, and also how we interact with public administration. This world is made up of an ecosystem where there's a coexistence of telecom, electronic networks, providers of electronic services, traditional companies, over-the-top companies, data storage companies, without forgetting final users and consumers, among others. Of course, there's a tension, we hope healthy, among the different actors and players in this value chain. One of the current points of tension is the possible fair contribution for the investment in the sector, the so-called fair share. This is discussed publicly by the European Commission, involving a possible contribution of over-the-top services providers for the investment costs in networks of very high worth. This is being discussed at European level, and the Ministry of Infrastructure has heard the position of different entities so as to present its own national position on the topic. And we will also, of course, take into account the contribution of ANACOM, the regulator. Regarding the investments in networks of high capacity, we're proud of the technological breakthroughs, and we are one of the countries in the European Union with the highest coverage of the population. The coverage of these networks is crucial to provide access by most of the population to advanced electronic communication services, so that consumers and companies can take full advantage of the potential of these networks, being crucial for territorial cohesion. With the purpose to ensure the access of the entire population to networks of very high capacity, eliminating regional asymmetries in access to these networks, and ensuring its coverage throughout the national territory, the government published at the end of last year the National Strategy for Very High Capacity Electronic Networks 2020-2030. This strategy includes as the main element launching public tenders for the installation and use of these networks in the so-called white areas. We are finishing our work together with the European Commission so that as soon as possible we may have the call for notice. The government also intends to carry out a revision of the legal regime, and this updating and simplification of processes linked to the development of apt infrastructures and the installation of electronic communication networks is very important within the scope of these standards, but also for the development of 5G networks or the repairing of malfunctions. Regarding connectivity, namely with the autonomous regions, we should also highlight the work developed regarding the replacement of the current CAM ring. This is a crucial infrastructure for the autonomous regions, enabling these regions to have a connection with enough capacity to meet the electronic communication needs on the long run. Both the coverage of the white areas as well as the connections with the autonomous regions are structuring projects and needed for the country, and it cannot be manageable that they are disconnected from the world or that the connection would depend only on private interests that are necessarily volatile and naturally volatile. This is not a criticism. Together with the new CAM connections, there's also the installation of smart cables that enable, among others, the environmental and seismic detection as well as the detection of other submarine activities. These are strategic services for the country and will also contribute towards the increase of national security. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like now to highlight the importance for the government, the geographical location of Portugal for submarine cables linking North America to South America and Africa to Europe through the Atlantic, and also cables linking these continents to South and North America. Besides our strategic geographical location for submarine cables from the south, north, and the west without land use, we also have a deep sea level on a very short distance from land, and to solve any problems related with security. Portugal also has one of the largest economic exclusive areas in the world, and the definition process is taking place within the UN, increasing the maritime area under our jurisdiction or sovereignty, extending beyond the economic exclusive zone for conservation, use of human resources, namely marine, soil, and subsoil. This is also a strategic advantage compared to other European Union countries, namely those with the coast in the North Atlantic. And it is in this case that the advantage of our geopolitical and strategic localization, and this is of the utmost importance. The natural conditions of the country have contributed so that in the past 15 years, Portugal was the second European country, together with Spain, where we have more intercontinental cables going through the North Atlantic. In our understanding, Portugal can, should, and will take better advantage of the potential linked to our strategic location in two areas. First, by maximizing the number of international submarine cables that are in our coast, and those by generating added value in this value chain, attracting investment in data processing centers that are crucial for the digital economy, providing access to information, and the growing number of data generated by citizens, public administration, businesses is a potential for the growth of the national economy, and we should take advantage of this. Data centers are the natural addition to maritime submarine cables. So it's not only about having Portugal for the mooring of cables, but to provide processing, and this with added value and with a bigger volume of investment and also of generating jobs. Currently in Portugal, we're investing in building one of the biggest data centers in EU, in an amount of about 3.5 million euros, and conditions are being generated to attract new data centers to Portugal, taking advantage of the mooring of international submarine cables and also renewable energy power stations. Energy is one of the most important production factors regarding immediate costs, and in particular for data centers, it is fundamental to resort to renewable energy. And as we all know, the country has unique conditions for the use of this type of clean energies, namely wind and solar, and also offshore wind solutions. Together with the energy pillar, we need to reinforce initiatives that enhance our strategic positioning within the scope of connectivity with the adequate and redundant capacity for the many European poles via Spain, land-wise, taking advantage of the international connectivity with submarine cables. This is one of the main challenges in telecom for the coming years. The other one is investing in 5G networks, fulfilling the coverage objectives defined in an adverse environment of inflation, problems with supply chains. So that these challenges are reached, we need a collective effort of all the players in the sector, to whom I must express my appreciation for the contribution they have given, are given, and will give to the sector and the benefits provided to all the Portuguese. We also need an open dialogue between the regulated and the regulator and the government, and the public policies that should be defined and pursued by the government, and the regulatory measures that should be carried out by ANACOM. ANACOM should not carry out administrative duties. That's why regulators exist. It's their technical and functional competence. And when that reality is not the case, things become less transparent, and this generates problems for all, for the sector, for the government, and this must be said also for the regulator. Independent regulation is essential, but it should be regulation and not defining public policies, and also administrative functions should be in the hands of the state and the services that depend upon the state. We started in January this year a new cycle when I took this ministry, and it's also the end of 4 members of the ANACOM board. I would like to thank them for their commitment, and all the collaborators of ANACOM without exception, because of their technical competences, and they have been in the country a pillar and developing a regulation in a very complex and dynamic sector. We rely on them all to ensure a foreseeable, balanced regulation, promoting the development of the sector, the competition, and what is important for the sectors, for the citizens. I hope in the future there will be institutional respect, seeking balanced solutions for the sector and for consumers, seeking synergies and productive processes. Within these lines, we should implement a communication policy that the country needs, with the involvement of operators, municipalities, and the regulator, providing stability to the sector. Thank you so much.
So now this is the end of the 32nd APDC Congress on digital disruption, and we understood how, João, it's influencing the companies and our lives, because we heard different topics from cybersecurity through sustainability and AI. It was once again a privilege and a pleasure to participate at this 32nd Congress. APDC will be 40 years old, and what was said was recorded and broadcasted live, is available online, will be available online. So if you want to go back to some of these debates presentation, you can, and do not forget to fill in the questionnaire on how we can improve it. We would like to thank this team, the team that organized and prepared this Congress that will return next year. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.